Okay, so to start off, let's first ask, can I just ask your name
Yeah,
and then also give me your background with Intune and Jamf Pro?
of course. So my name is Simon. I work as a principal workplace and security architect. So I'm a consultant for a telco based in Sweden. I've been working with Microsoft Intune since the very early days. So I recently found a screenshot 12 years that I took 12 years ago on my first implementation of Intune. So for the last 12 years, that's what I've mainly done. I became Microsoft MVP, so Microsoft Most Valued Professional within Intune 6 years ago, I think it is today. Um, so I have some some extensive knowledge of it, according to Microsoft at least. Uh, I then ran a program at one of my previous employers where I was tasked to get them up to speed on their Apple partnerships, and one of those aspects were working with Jamf. So I started to work with Jamf, or at least know more about Jamf, around probably 6 or 7 years ago. Uh, but it wasn't until 4 or 5 years ago, I would say, where I actually started to work with Jamf and mainly doing things where Jamf and Microsoft does great things together. So for the last 4 years, I've been speaking at JNUC virtually and on site, and are helping my customers making the right decisions for their free choice within their organizations, where Jamf would be one of my go-to tools combined with Microsoft Intune.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro, Simon. So I'm going to dive into the questions. So the
Mhm.
first question I have is something I'm trying to figure out how to do
Yep.
best. So one of the things we hear, the buzzwords we hear from Jamf Pro is zero touch provisioning.
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out how to set up zero touch provisioning similar to something we would do in Jamf Pro. Obviously, there's the macOS onboarding thing now. That's not going to be possible in Intune. But even like an older dep notify onboarding workflow, I'm trying to figure out how to do. So, do you have any thoughts on how that can be done, or if it's even possible to do something like that?
So to get a similar experience to what you get with Jamf, to the best of my knowledge today, you need to do that with third-party tools. The main thing that is lacking is the ability to actually install things while you do the provisioning, which there are some limitations to within Microsoft Intune today. So I would say that the experience with an actual zero-touch provisioning that you get from Jamf, you can't get that with Intune today. It's obviously something that a lot of people are asking for, and therefore Microsoft is probably working on something like that. But today, you really need to use some kind of third-party open source tools to make that experience better in terms of the information you can provide to the users, the ability to bootstrap things to the deployment, and so on. Um, so that is like where you get the first point of differentiation between Jamf and Microsoft Intune, and where, in my opinion, the main reason for that is that Microsoft have for a long time really haven't been the best friends with Apple. That's changing now, but the insights and the capabilities that Jamf still have in within Mac OS, it's something that Intune lacks. So you won't get the same experience. I would say it's improved quite significantly. You have less clicks and less things to go through on Mac OS today, but you won't get to the same actual zero touch provisioning as you can get with Jamf.
Cool. And just to be specific, if we talk about third-party tools, back even a year ago in Jamf,
Hmm.
use third-party tools to get what we would call zero-touch provisioning,
Yeah.
which is something with an onboarding window that the user
Hmm.
could see. We use dep notify, Swift Dialog, Splash Buddy, like any of those tools.
Hmm.
But I'm struggling to see how I can even implement one of those tools to get a similar workflow to what we can do in Jamf Pro.
Yeah, and you can edit this question later on, but I'm trying to find the tool that my colleagues are working with um, to make that work. And I can give you a better video response soon. Um, because I'm a little bit uncertain of which tool, because I personally, that is to most of my customers, it's not something they they accept the onboarding experience they get with InTune because they feel that they don't need more than
Okay.
that. So I will find the tool that my colleagues have been using.
Yeah, so a lot of
Otherwise,
people
will you?
we're working
Yeah,
with that have Intune, they're like, we're fine doing the bare minimum. We don't
yeah,
need a zero touch provisioning workflow or anything like that.
yeah. And like for most of the customers I work with, they don't have anything today. So whatever they get with Intune, that is still better, and they really don't compare that to anything else. But we'll get to that point later on when I assume with some of your following questions. But I think it's is it Octory you can use to get that a
Yeah,
little better.
Octory is kind of similar to Splash Buddy. I've
Yeah,
never used it, but I had them speak at one of our meetups, so I'm a little bit
yeah,
familiar with it. But
yeah. So just to give you a good answer for the video, uh, I would say the main tool that I've heard being used with Intune to get a little better experience would be Octory. Uh, they have official documentation on how to deploy that with Intune, and that gives you some parts of it. But I do think it's also vital to look at what many of the organizations that go into Intune as the management tool sees, because many of them haven't had any management of macOS before. So whatever Intune provides them, it's the better solution for them since they haven't had anything. And
mm,
then when they get more Mac users that might be more used to using Mac OS, or when they have a bigger amount of Macs that are getting enrolled and they start to see all the challenges that can come with that, then they look into other things. And it's natural that they then would like to find something that works well with Intune before looking at other things. So then they find Octory, and that will help them get some parts in terms of notifications and some other things. There are obviously other tooling, but the one that I've seen most use of would be Octory.
mhm. And just to explain for the audience, Octory does have a free version. I've not played around with it. From
Mhm.
what I know, this is basically this very similar to Splash Buddy. So the free version, and then there's the pro version that's 2.4 euros per device per year, which, compared to Jamf Pro is a much cheaper price.
Yeah,
Anyway, just showing
but then
that.
you obviously have to add that to the Intune license cost, because a very common argument for using Intune is that it's free,
Mhm.
but you have already paid for it within your Microsoft licenses. Mostly, at least. There can be other options, but most organizations have paid for it within their Microsoft 365 licenses. So
Mhm.
depending on how you count, if it's something you have to pay regardless, which in many cases it is, then it's the Octory part that adds on. But in practice, you also have the Intune license cost,
Yeah,
which is X amount of dollars per month per user.
yeah. Um, Okay, so just to kind of, and maybe you might need to reach out to your colleagues about this, but
Mhm.
so from my understanding, with any of these tools, if you want them to work properly, we need to be able to control the order that things are installed, or at the very least, control what is installed first. Because
Yeah.
if I can deploy Dep Notify, Octory, Splash Buddy, any of these tools
Mhm.
before anything else, I can kind of ensure that they're guiding the rest of that process to some way.
Yeah.
Is there any way in Intune, like I have not figured out a way to control like this gets deployed first. So within Jamf Pro, I can have it deployed as like a pre-stage enrollment
Mhm.
package. I haven't seen a way to do that here.
No, and there isn't one. And that's the same thing for Windows. You don't have the ability to control the order of the applications or the scripts or the profiles, even on Windows today or any platform that's controlled by Intune. Uh, the way others have done it is obviously that they do kind of different kinds of scripting or logics in terms of what what do have to be on the client before you actually install the next thing, but you don't have the concept of prioritizing applications on any platform for Intune. So it will install at random order, and the best thing you can do to get that better setup would be to use some kind of, again, third-party tool to deploy them. But
Yeah,
natively
but
with
even if I
Intune, you don't have
use
that order.
Yeah, even if I use Octary though, like Octary needs to get installed at some
Yeah,
point. So
yeah,
if it's installed in a random order, like it could be installed first, in which
yeah,
case that's great because it launches its
hmm
window, it'll show the rest of the installs, but it
yeah,
also could be installed last if it's a random order.
yeah.
And in that
And
case, you don't see any window pop up.
no, and that's like I said, it's the same thing when you do autopilot, which is the equivalent of Apple Business Manager and device enrollment program for Windows. You don't have the ability to control the order of applications there either. It's not part of the concept. The only thing you could do for Windows today would be to say that you have dependencies on a certain app, but that feature isn't available for Mac OS today.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no way to set any dependencies. You can set like pre-install and post-install scripts on a package,
Yeah.
but that doesn't really help.
No,
Um,
no, because you can obviously do things within that pre and post install script, which would install other things, but then you don't get the logic. So if say that you have an app and you want Octary to be deployed first and you do the pre-install script, it won't report on Octary actually being installed, since it will only report back on like the pre-script did run successfully, and then it will move on. So you don't get that deep insight into what actually happened. At what stage is this application? You will only see the actual main application being reported in Intune.
yeah.
And then hopefully it will run the pre and post script successfully.
Yeah, so you have a couple things happening. You can't control the order of the installs.
No,
I don't think you can install Octary through a script. It's probably through a package, right?
that is also a discussion, like in terms of how you deploy applications. Microsoft does provide a GitHub repository of a number of different shell scripts that you could use to install applications that would be more challenging to install using the built-in application delivery methods that they have today in terms of PKG and DMG files.
Hmm.
So what many of my customers are doing, especially for more advanced applications like security products, VPN, proxies, whatever it might be, they actually install it using shell scripts instead, because then they can control more of the logic inside of the script. And that's something that
But
Microsoft provides.
yeah, but in that case, is this kind of like Installamator where they're pulling a DMG from somewhere online,
Yeah,
unpackaging it, and installing on the computer?
yes, correct. So if
Which
you
is
want
fine
more, yeah,
for I think most organizations, but
mhm,
organizations that are more security focused, like having the checksum of like an actual package where
yeah,
it's like, because with Jamf Pro, even with app installers, it's not
mhm,
doing the installamator type thing. What
no,
it's actually doing is they package each of those applications, add it to their repository, and then do a
mhm,
checksum to
yeah,
make sure that that package is getting installed on that is getting installed on the computer is actually that package and not chances of having some type of man-in-the-middle attack.
no, exactly. And like the option, the third option, if you don't do the native installations and you don't do the scripting version, is using something like Monkey with Intune, which is what I would say the main go-to solution again for many Intune administrators. That okay, if what we get from Intune isn't sufficient, they still want to use Intune, they use Monkey. And integrate that with Intune instead to get more advanced capabilities when it comes to application deployments and updates. So I think that goes back to, like, I usually explain it in three different steps. In my personal opinion, if you haven't done anything with Mac OS before and you just want the bare minimum, the basics, the inventory, doing some security controls, deploying a few applications, then Intune is fine. If you want to do more things and have more time and are capable and comfortable in managing other third-party tools like open source things or paid ones, are able to build some Azure automation around that, then you can do a lot of open source things and Intune will work just fine. I have organizations that are running thousands of Macs with that setup, but that requires a very specific and very broad skill set and a lot of time put into that solution. And still, if you're serious with your Mac OS estate, go for Jamf and integrate it with Intune. That is my main point when it comes to discussion with my customers, because that combination it gives you the best of both worlds. It's a supported solution. You don't get into situations where you need to do tons of scripting or figuring out other things.
Mhm. Cool. All right, that was the first question. We only have a couple minutes left. So I
Yeah.
might just ask some like more general questions just
Hmm.
on, or specific questions, I should say, not interview style.
Yeah.
One thing I'm trying to figure out with scripts is I have
Hmm.
these scripts here. The
Yeah.
frequency that you run scripts with,
Hmm.
it's either like some type of ongoing frequency, like
Hmm.
once every week,
Hmm.
uh, or you can just do not configured. If I do
Yeah.
not configured, does that mean it only runs once?
Yeah, then it would only run once, and
Okay.
if it fails, you still have the number of retries
Okay,
that will happen. So not
good to
configured,
know.
run once. Yeah, and that's obviously what you want to achieve. Like some things you only want to do once, like renaming the device, if you don't want to ensure that the name is still there, of course. Uh, but this would be a perfect example of where I wouldn't configure a script frequency and just ask it run once, run successful, and then you're done.
Yep, perfect. And then
And it's also important to note that the last time I checked documentation, if the first attempt fails, it will never show as successful, even if a retry did succeed.
oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, so that's good to know. If you see something that it says fail, but it actually has done something, then probably the rerun or the retry did work, and it just haven't updated the reporting.
Yeah. Another question, is there anything like the Jamf binary on the computer where if I like want to just make this script run, I can type something in terminal and get it to run?
There is the InTune management extension that should be running it. The challenge is that when it downloads the script, it downloads it in the cache, and then the management extension kicks it off and runs it. Then the script is deleted, so it won't retain the script depending on how you configure it. So it is complicated to rerun a script manually.
Oh, I'm not talking
Um,
about rerunning it. I'm just like running it the first time if I'm being impatient and testing and like, cool, I
ah,
set up the script. I want to see how it works.
No, not to my knowledge on Mac OS, because it still needs to get the policy. It needs to download the script and it needs to kick that off from the management extension.
And initiate that with like a sudo intune policy computer rename or something.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just
So yeah,
curious. That's the
I
process.
can look it up, but not to my knowledge.
And then I'll use this one as an example because it's
Hmm.
better. It's probably
Yeah.
be my last question. Is there any way to like dig into these logs a bit more? Because when I pull up this one, I get an error.
Hmm.
If I view report, I can see the error here, but I get
Hmm.
no information about this error.
And if you click on the device name,
So if I click here, it'll
there you get
show.
an error code.
Okay,
Yeah,
what do I do
and
with
it
that?
you Google it.
Okay, so I'm not going to
Uh,
get any information outside of an error code, and then I can Google that and hopefully figure out.
Yeah, you can probably try to check the if you press each of the settings, you should get a report of that entire one. Um, so if you click enable or force enable in setup assistance, it should take you to the settings
Oh, this,
detailed,
okay,
and
so
then you
there,
get it
that's how
more.
I pull it up.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So hopefully that will help you. But otherwise, the logging is very, very limited. There are basically two logs on the actual Mac which you can
That doesn't make
collect.
any sense. I'm just setting up file vault. There's
Yeah.
no VPN service.
No, and then it's probably something that it's recognized that usually comes through VPN, something like that, and
Okay,
therefore it figures it out. But that's the best logging you can get in the console today.
awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, well, that concludes our time, Simon. I know
yeah,
you need going, so I want to respect your time.